In World War II, someone looked at an aircraft carrier and thought, what if we made this thing out of ice? Not a small boat, not a temporary raft, a real military aircraft carrier. Made from frozen water and wood pulp, and the strangest part is not that someone suggested it. The strangest part is that serious people actually tested it. This was Project Habakkuk, one of the weirdest wartime ideas ever taken seriously. The goal was simple. Put an airfield in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The method was less simple. Build a gigantic floating island out of reinforced ice, park aircraft on top of it, and hope nobody noticed that the entire plan depended on refrigeration. At first, this sounds like the kind of idea a tired engineer writes down at 3 in the morning and immediately regrets. But during the war, the problem was real. German submarines were attacking Allied convoys in the Atlantic. These convoys carried food, fuel, weapons, and supplies. And there was a dangerous stretch of ocean where short-range aircraft could not easily protect them. So the question became, how do you get planes into the middle of the ocean without building a normal aircraft carrier? One answer was, you build an aircraft carrier that is not normal in any way. The idea came from British wartime planning and was connected to Geoffrey Pike, an inventor with a talent for proposing things that sounded impossible, expensive, and somehow still interesting. Instead of using huge amounts of steel, the ship would use a strange material called pykrete. Pykrete was basically ice mixed with wood pulp, which sounds like something you would invent by accident while ruining a smoothie. But pykrete had a trick. It was much tougher than normal ice. It melted more slowly, and it was surprisingly hard to break. So now the idea had moved from, let's make a ship out of ice, to, let's make a ship out of special war ice. Which is not better, exactly, but it is more official. The proposed ship would not be a small experiment. It would be enormous. A floating airbase, a frozen runway, a giant block of military optimism drifting through the Atlantic. And because it was made of ice, it would need insulation, and refrigeration, and pipes, and machinery, and steel, and money, lots of money. This is where the beautiful disaster begins. The whole point was to avoid the limits of normal shipbuilding, but the more people studied the idea, the more normal shipbuilding problems came back wearing. A winter coat? You needed to keep the ship cold. You needed to stop it from cracking. You needed to move it. You needed to repair it. You needed to land planes on it. And somewhere, probably, someone had to ask, what happens if our aircraft carrier starts melting? Which is not a question any Navy wants to answer, but Project Habakkuk was not just a drawing. A secret prototype was built in Alberta, Canada. That is the moment this story becomes truly strange, because this was not just a ridiculous meeting. Someone actually made a test version. People worked on it. Scientists studied it. Engineers calculated it. And for a while, the ice aircraft carrier was a real wartime project. Imagine being the person assigned to guard that secret. Do not tell anyone about the giant frozen warship. That is either a military order or the beginning of a very bad children's book. But then reality arrived. The project needed insulation, refrigeration systems, steel, and a serious investment. At the same time, other solutions were improving. Radar got better, escort ships became more effective, remote bases helped cover more ocean, and longer-range aircraft made the original problem less desperate. So the ice ship lost its purpose. Not because ice cannot float. Ice floats perfectly. That was never the problem. The problem was that turning ice into an aircraft carrier somehow made ice expensive and complicated and slow and very difficult to explain without sounding like you had lost a bet. So Project Habakkuk was abandoned. No full-sized ice aircraft carrier ever joined the war. No frozen runway crossed the Atlantic. No pilot had to ask permission to land on a giant refrigerated iceberg. But the idea survived because it sits in the perfect place between genius and terrible judgment. It was ridiculous, but not random. It came from a real problem. It used a real material. It had real research behind it. And that is what makes it so fascinating. History is full of ideas that were obviously bad. Project Habakkuk is better than that. It was the kind of bad idea that almost made sense. And if building an aircraft carrier out of ice sounds strange, wait until you hear about the weapon that was defeated by its own instructions. That one somehow gets worse.